You're listening to Childcare Sights and Sounds, hosted by Danny Christine, presented by childcaresites.com.
All right, are we ready for the real talk this episode? I really try to always come to whatever audience on whatever platform with positivity and light, but I have to be honest, the last couple of months I have been very angry. I am incredibly frustrated with the whole system of subsidized childcare, or I guess really more specifically the way that my state has been implementing the child care assistance program recently, this year specifically. And maybe it's not a statewide issue, it's likely a county issue or maybe even regional. But I have been seeing a lot of complaints from other childcare providers across the whole state. So I do feel like it is a statewide issue that needs to be addressed and corrected expeditiously. Subsidized childcare, if you don't know, is a financial assistance program that helps low-income families pay for childcare. The federal government funds the Child Care and Development Fund, or what's abbreviated as CCDF, and it provides that grant to each state or territory, and that state has to administer the child care subsidy, usually through like countywide systems. For us in New York State, it's the money from the CCDF is split up into local district social services districts. So in New York State, the Child Care Assistance Program, or CCAP, is usually referred to as DSS throughout the state. To my knowledge, or if you are in New York City, it's usually referred to as ACS, because those are the local social services districts that handle the processing of applications for the Child Care Assistance Program whenever families come to apply for it, and distributing funds to the child care programs if they choose to accept it. So it is optional. At least in New York, I'm pretty sure everywhere, everyone has the right to choose whether or not they want to accept families that are using the child care assistance program. But in many cases, I would argue more often than not, a lot of providers do choose to accept it because it is it's a benefit. It should be a benefit. It should be looked at as a benefit for everyone involved, not just the parents because their childcare is free or reduced, but also the providers because their income should be guaranteed when it comes to those families. And it also should be a win for the state or the local social services district because of the economy. This program allows families to have the freedom and availability to work and make more money in their local district or their local neighborhood or city. If families don't have childcare that's affordable to them and their budget, then they cannot go to work. So it's literally a win-win-win. And I really want to hear your thoughts on it and how subsidized childcare works in your area, because I have heard from clients or other people I've networked with that their childcare subsidy does not pay what the actual cost of care is. And I do think that that's generally the consensus, that it is not quite up to par with what the actual cost of running a program is. I do think that there are some states that are a little more generous with how much money they do pay per child, like in each age group, to each program, because the market rates are different. And I do think that New York may fall on the higher end of the spectrum if you look across all states. I could be wrong about that. I have not fact checked myself there. But I have also heard that some providers are not allowed to charge families the difference when the market rate or the payment rate that they get is not the same as what they charge their private pay families, which that's crazy to me. If your local childcare subsidy is not allowing you to charge your private pay families and subsidized families the same, then how do they expect you to sustain if they're not the ones that are going to be making up the difference? So that's weird. New York is not like that. If your tuition rate exceeds the amount that they are going to pay, you can tell the families, like, you have to pay the difference. Some people will argue, well, how are the families going to be able to pay the difference? That's the reason that they're on the subsidy in the first place. They cannot afford to pay the difference. And while I do understand that, there are some people that can afford it or do have help other ways, or I don't know. But in my experience over the years, we have charged the difference and parents do pay the difference. So let me know what goes on in your state as it relates to subsidies. But that's not even the topic of this podcast episode. Right now, what I have been frustrated with is, please head on over to your favorite podcast streaming platform to listen to the remainder of this episode. You can find Child Care Sights and Sounds on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Listen in and be sure to scroll down to the rate and review section to leave your feedback. You can find the link in the description of this video and it'll bring you straight to the podcast episode. Thanks for listening.